Guests on Keel heard via Jack Spring Electric Keel Newsmaker Hotline. Mr. Mark Cooper is Chief of Staff for Governor John Bel Edwards. Mr. Mark, thank you for joining us this morning. Thanks for getting up early. Nice talking to you.
Good morning, Robert.
Deborah Birx was in town at LSU for roundtable discussions about what Louisiana is doing. Pretty complimentary of our efforts, would you say?
Yes, I would say that, Aaron. Actually, she's visiting all the universities, but that's actually her second visit to LSU. You know, she was here about 8 weeks ago. I've lost track of time with the vice president. But, yeah, she was very complimentary. I mean, it's important to remember that, you know, we do weekly calls with the White House Corona Task Force that Vice President Pence, you know, chairs, and she's on those calls. And the governor, you know, talks to her on a regular basis, as well as the vice president, as well as Dr. Fauci about what Louisiana's doing. And they've looked to us for a lot, and she even said this yesterday, as far as the masking and some of the other things that we're doing. They've looked at that as a best, you know, example, best practice, you know, for the rest of the country. So she was very highly complimentary. But I just, you know, think it's important to know that we work really closely with her and with the task force and what the state's been doing.
Okay, Robert's got an uppercut. You ready?
No, this is not an uppercut. No,
I'm ready for it.
Okay, a jab.
Because I would imagine that you and the governor are getting a zillion emails on this and calls, and it has to do with the one day you can't drink at 10, the next day you can drink at 11. And I said, if that's got to some degree in the minds of everybody sort of undermine the credibility of all the other rules, including that one. How did that happen? How did you get to the 10 o'clock? And then what happened? Suddenly it's 11.
Well, first of all, there is no rule book on this. There's nothing that's been put out by every state. You know, before we came out with the last order, we looked at what all the states were doing with regards to restaurant and bars and thinking we'd find, you know, maybe a consistent practice or best practice. But the bottom line is there wasn't any. They were all different. Some closed even earlier than that. Some had different, you know, capacities. Some didn't do anything at all. So, you know, the 10 o'clock was a time that we felt was appropriate. And then after talking, you know, and we work closely with the Louisiana Restaurant Association, and after discussing with them and some of the calls that they had received, we decided to do as we should be flexible when it makes sense. And that's when we switched it to 11 o'clock.
So the Restaurant Association was not consulted about 10 o'clock, or did they go 10 o'clock, good idea, and then they changed their minds?
They were notified and it was discussed with them, but again, it was changed based on being flexible and knowing what's best. And after we heard from some of the restaurant owners, the governor spoke to them, and that's what we decided to do.
What is the relationship? That's not the right word. What is the governor's opinion toward Mayor Cantrell in New Orleans and her clinging to Phase 2?
Well, as far as his opinion, I mean, as we've said all along, you know, parishes can be stricter, but they can't be less strict in the state. And so he's going to leave that up to the local level. We want local mayors and parish presidents to make their decision based on the data and what they're looking at. So whether it's Mayor Cantrell or the mayor of Natchitoches or wherever, we're going to support what they're doing as long as they're not being less strict than what the state mandates are.
So when Mayor Cantrell says New Orleans hasn't gotten its fair share of CARES Act money and isn't going to do anything, that she won't okay the Saints having people in the Superdome until they get more cash, the governor is good with that? What does he think about that?
No, I think what he would say is we've been very fair with the city of New Orleans, as we have with all the cities. We've looked, you know, the formula that's been developed to determine how much a local municipality gets for the care funding is based on number of cases, population. So I think what he would say is we've been fair with that. So, I mean, if she made that statement, I haven't seen that statement, but if she made that statement, you know, again, we're going to follow the measures that have been developed on how that CARES money is distributed, and it's a fair process, and we understand, you know, that New Orleans, especially early on, they're expending a lot of money because they, you know, had one of the highest positivity rates probably in the world, increases that were going on, and so based on the amount of funding that we've received from the CARES Act, they've gotten their percentage based on the number of cases and population. And don't forget, we're hoping, and I know they're working on it now, is that Congress, there will be another CARES Act 2.0 that we will have that will also support local municipalities, including New Orleans.
Legislative session Monday, one of their top priorities is to, quote, rein in the power of the governor in these emergency situations. The governor says you can't govern by committee. Is he prepared to veto any action they take in this regard?
Yeah, absolutely. The Constitution's clear about the powers of the executive branch, and we are not out of alignment with other states, even more conservative states, or even stricter with the processes they put in place, including Texas and Mississippi. So, I think that there's just a small group. I think they're out of touch that are pushing that. Some from Northwest Louisiana, but we know, and again, as I said earlier, the governor has been in lockstep with President Trump and the Corona Task Force. Everything we've done, they've lauded that. You said that at the beginning of the interview, and that's not just Dr. Birx. It's also the vice president and the president have lauded what we're doing here in Louisiana. And, we understand that there are people that are still hurting as they are throughout the country, especially bars, that can't open. And we want to get, quickly to that happening. We changed, the rules in this last proclamation. We now have about 18 parishes that are below the positivity rate of the 5%. And so they have the option of opening. So we're going to continue to do all we can to support, the economy, support businesses, given the situation that we're in. I think too that, we forget that per capita with the total number of cases, we're still number one in the country. And not too long ago, just a few weeks ago, we were one of the red zones. And, we're doing a lot better, as Dr. Birx, brought up yesterday. But as she also said, is that we've done the right things, and she's recommending that we stay the path that the governor's been on. So I think, the legislators down here, the small number, they're just not looking at what's best for Louisiana. They're not looking at the leadership that this governor's provided. They talk a lot about, supporting the president. We're talking about Republicans, the Republican legislators. Well, the president's supporting and the vice president's supporting what the governor's doing here.
Mark, where are we going to get the money to shore up the unemployment fund so that business tax does not kick in?
And let me kick something in, kick again. Let me throw something in on the end of that. Is the governor willing to work with the legislature in figuring out a way to keep that payroll tax from being implemented?
Yeah, we're looking at all options on that. I know we're looking at the Main Street program that the state treasurer is running. Not as many people have signed up for that program, so that's potentially a source for that fund. And then again, in looking at, we know there's going to be another CARES 2.0. They're going to be looking at unemployment. So yeah, he's willing to work on all options to see what's best for for our citizens, and that's something that he said, and that's one of the things that we'll look at all options during the session.